Have you ever wondered what a game designer actually does at a game studio? Or maybe you run a indie studio or a startup and you're thinking it might be helpful to have somebody come in to help you with your vision. Today, I've got my friend Lee Kemp from Tea Imp Games joining me for a chat. He shares so much advice on game design. He tells us a bit about what it's like to work with someone like him, an expert in games design. And he's going to tell us a little bit about his indie game project as well. I hope you enjoy the chat. Let's get on with it. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Goth Boss podcast. I am your host, Kat Burton. Today, I have my good friend Lee Kemp with me. Lee is from Tea Imp Games, and he is a bloody brilliant game designer. So we're going to talk all things game design today. Lee, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad we get to have a catch up. It's been a while.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
It's been way too long. Would you please give us a little overview of who you are and what it is that you do?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Lee. I run a tiny indie studio called Tea Imp Games. There's like two of us, and then some of our very good freelancing friends. We're making a game called Thingamajigs at the moment, which is this beautiful little game. And before that, I was the head of design at a place called Wholesome and a designer at a place called Hammerhead. And I've basically worked on games big and small, freelance and not freelance, a lot of VR stuff. And yeah, that's basically me.
Amazing. Yeah. And so you're based in the north of England, right? Outside many of the traditional games hub and game cities. And I'm sort of been the same. I've been outside of sort of London and the bigger places from Brighton and all of that. Post pandemic, I feel like we've seen loads of studios moving more remote and people can live kind of where they want. So I wanted
Mhm.
to ask you, just because I think you'll relate being north of England, just does your location impact you at all? And has that affected your business and your journey as a game designer?
Um, I think y I think unavoidably, yes, to some capacity, um, not having local connections or people like you can rely on, and you can meet up regularly. That face-to-face connection, as we all know from going to global events, right? Like Develop and GDC or Gamescom, they're all really important. Like people see your face or they forget about you, and that definitely is true when you're still doing business and trying to get freelance work in. Like the local support networks where I live are, I would say, pretty good, but they're not like Brighton and Guildford and that sort of level. Um, but I think it's with things going more remote, like the global opportunities are much better, in a way that they weren't previously before. Although obviously with all the layoffs and the stuff, it's harder now. Um, but yeah, I think it's challenging, but it's doable now. Where in previous times it might just not have been.
Yeah, I think you're right with things sort of opening up. It makes people not in your city more open to hiring you when
Yeah,
you can't move or relocate. And I think I see a lot of like polls on LinkedIn and places out asking people if they'd be willing to relocate for a games job. And most people are like, hell no, because the games is just
yeah,
such a mess. Why would you uproot your whole life for a job right now when everything's so unstable, right?
yeah. As a guy who's got two kids, one of them starting nursery, and I'm like, okay, like I'm sort of in that the second, third, fourth wave of whatever of people who sort of like saw games as a career, right? Because there was the early stuff, and then not really a lot for a while, and then there's like been a big boom in game development. Um, I think a lot of people, especially like around about our age, like relocating is just not something you're going to do for a job. I think a lot of the time, unless it's something that's massive or something you feel really strongly about, or you wanted to relocate anywhere. Um, it's just not compatible, especially if you want to start a family, which is obviously what I've done. Um, I think we're seeing one of the biggest downfalls of what I'm seeing recently is when people are now insisting that you go back at least hybrid and return to industry. But from my experience very recently, I'm seeing a lot of people, even in hybrid roles, now saying, "Oh, actually, kind of need to open it to remote because they're just not going to get like senior people to relocate." Like I think juniors or people trying to get entry positions, they're much more likely, obviously, because you don't have as many connections to where you are. Um, but for senior staff, which is one of the biggest requirements right now, right, from studios and seniority, I'm seeing positions that were hybrid or they're trying to get people in the studio open up to be more remote, which I think is interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think for juniors as well, it's almost nicer for them to be in an office-based environment a
I
lot because they can
Yeah, I think it's
learn
great.
from everybody and just pick up so much stuff and build that network because your network really helps you as you go through
Yeah,
your career, right?
Yeah, I think being in an office environment for a junior is just the best. Like, just like you miss out on so much if you don't have it. I'm someone who personally massively prefers to work in an office. I
Yeah,
just haven't for like 4 years,
yeah.
by the nature of what I've been doing. Um, but yeah, I think like if I hadn't been in an office when I was starting out, that would have really sucked out. I think it'd feel quite isolating because the isolation is easy to deal with when you have a lot of connections and a lot of you work remote and you can sort of do that. But if you don't know people, it's hard.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think for me, my first job in games at Mind Candy, like we had this like little studio in Battersea at the time. And it's like old like warehouse building. Um,
Right.
and it was such a vibe though, because there was when I first started, there was like 15 of us, and there'd be like
Mhm.
8 o'clock on a Friday, and we'd all play rock band
Mhm.
after work. And you feel like you make mates and you go to the pub, you do pub lunches, and it's such a vibe. But yeah, it's not as easy when you've got roots and mortgages and kids and dogs and all of that.
Yeah, yeah, that pretty big limiters, yeah.
Yeah, but I do agree that like I honestly prefer working in an office as well. I would happily work in an office if I could find one that was affordable and easy to get to. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think also you see more people doing that for the social side. But yeah, it's nice to know though that you've got plenty of work where you are and that there's lots of opportunities globally, even if not necessarily locally.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so one of the things I wanted to chat to you about is sort of we met through you did some work for Vespa, which I was the co-founder of previously, and you came in as this sort of designer, like reviewer extraordinaire.
Right, yeah, yeah,
You
sure.
came in and wrote this incredible report, which basically like ripped the game design to shreds and basically said like, this is wrong, this is great, like we could do this. And you came up with all these amazing suggestions and solutions for stuff. And
Thanks. Yeah,
everything you said was like, tick, agree, yep, okay, right, we've got a lot to do. like,
right.
but it was all brilliant. Like, it was so, so helpful because not many people are willing to come in and give that really like honest advice. And that's often what we all need to hear, right? You need that honest insight.
Oh,
So
absolutely, yeah.
I would love to talk a little bit about just design in general and the design reviews that you often do. So, given design is it's really broad, what's your favorite thing about being a designer?
I don't know, I'm something of like generalist prime. I've never actually worked on a game that has been in the same genre. Every single game I've worked on has been in a completely different genre from one another. Yeah, so I'm not. Yeah, I like that though. When I first started out, I was working at a company that where we do like client projects and other stuff. Like project to project was like completely different. Like 1 minute we're making like a live VR like thing that has to be performed by audience members on stage in Cannes, and you're like, well, that's crazy. And then the next minute, you're like, oh, now we're making like a top-down pixel art shooter that's like in early access and loads of people playing, and it's like a live game. And you're like, this is a very different vibe. So I like that, and I think I really like breaking down a game and seeing like, okay, what parts of it work well together, what parts of it don't, and finding the where the cohesion is, and then where you can add or pull or remove or adjust. Like everything is like a puzzle for me to break down. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think that cohesion part is like super relevant as well because that's what I've seen you do as well. It's like there's all these little ideas that get put in and stuff gets
Yeah.
spotted on, but there's nothing that really connects them all together and they're not balanced. And that is definitely what I saw you do in that report is you found a way to take all these separate things and make them work together.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the sign of sort of when you get a bit more experience in design, like it's sort of in line with like game direction, where like I think a lot of the stuff I've done before is like working with a creative director who has like this thing in their head, and they're like this is like, and it's probably a beautiful and wonderful thing. And when you talk to them about it, you're like you can see the passion behind it, and then they're like you can see what they're going for and the vision of it, but then they try and make a game out of it, and it just doesn't click in the way that their vision does. Even though you can see the vision, if they've demonstrated it really clearly, you can get behind it, you bought in. But then it's always that the designer's job or the game direction part of it is the like practice of doing it in practice. Like, oh, I see that, but the way that you think that will work actually maybe can work like this, or those things are in conflict because when you get down to the like game design's all about the details, right? It's like the nitty gritty. It's like, okay, that is really cool, but by the 20th or 1000th time you do that thing, you're suggesting it's going to suck, no matter what game it is. Um, and so yeah, it is. It's cohesion's a huge part of it, but I think it's one of those things that only comes with experience, basically.
Yeah, and that is something that I've often seen as well, is that experience is so important because I think a lot of people feel like just because they've played a game and they like a particular genre or a particular thing, like, I am now a game designer, like, I know what to do, right? But there's so much balance and nuance that's kind of not obvious behind the scenes, which is where you come in with your like your speciality and your expertise that I think other people wouldn't see because if they just take it on a surface level, oh, it's these basic mechanics.
Yeah.
There's a lot of refinement behind the scenes that needs someone like you.
I like to think so. Yeah, yeah. It's a lot of seeing how the cogs actually go together. That's basically the job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
rather than just being like a box of cogs that don't really go
Yeah,
together.
because I think mimicry is really easy, right? Like you can mimicking something that you've seen be fun and successful. It turns out like it might have been the smallest piece of the game that was the glue that made those fun together.
Yeah.
And actually in it separate and just sort of plugged in the same thing, or maybe the aesthetic wasn't putting your brain in the same space to enjoy it as that other game was. There's lots of things to go into it. Like when I worked on a game called Jurassic World Aftermath, the big VR game, 90% of the fun, it was a game with a rat that chased you around. It was like a horror-ish game. 90% of the fun was from being scared of this thing that in actual practice, right, wasn't hyper advanced. It wasn't calculating it. I mean, it was doing a lot, but it wasn't doing like what you would think it was doing when you played it. And a lot of the game only became fun once we started to get art and sound in, right? Like really advanced art and sound of like, sound occlusion. So the raptors on this type of surface through that wall. And because the type of game it was, all the fun was being scared and you moving on anyway and pushing forward with it. But if you were to give that exact same AI to something else and it was a grey box, which we'd done, um, it was not fun. We were sort of like struggling to tell if it was going to be fun. I think it's something similar happened. I remember watching a documentary on alien isolation. They got 2 years in and were like, "Is this good?" Because you just can't tell until you're closer to the end, or you've got certain things in place to put your brain in the right place to see it, which is really interesting. It's something that's specific to certain genres I've found.
I was going to say, yeah, it sounds quite specific to horror games because so many games you build your prototype and it is fully grey box. Like I remember working on like the Bradwell conspiracy with George Backer and the team, and
Right, right.
like it grey boxed everything. Like it was just like just just cubes everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we had cubes. We had cubes, but it was the problem is that the majority of our games sort of experience, the core experience we were making, it relied on that like it was our entire pitch was basically like the kitchen scene from Jurassic Park 1. Like we want you to play that. And it was like, okay, until you have that and you have all the things that put that together and give you the information and the feedback that lets you be scared in a fun way, it wasn't quite there. In contrast with something like that's mechanically deep and interesting, like when you're like you a game with melee combat and you're like, right, I'm going to press this button, I'm going to parry at the right time. There's like a mechanical satisfaction. That game didn't have mechanical satisfaction because it was all about vibe. There's what the feeling of being scared and the feeling of being pursued. And there are other games that were kind of like what Vespa was doing, right? Where you're like, oh, it's the feeling of being involved and trips along a long story, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that feeling counts for so much. So I guess given you've worked in all these different genres and you do these like either game design work or you do like design reviews for people, can you walk us through that process? So if someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I've got this game, we've made a fair bit of progress on it, but just something's not clicking, it's not feeling fun just yet." What's your process? How do you go in and sort of analyze it and provide that feedback to the client?
Yeah, so I think this is something that I sort of came up with because freelance design isn't a very typical thing to do. But I generally like to go into a game completely unbothered by other people's opinions of how it should play out, what it is. So generally speaking, I like to just get access to a playable thing that is, for all intents and purposes, like the vision of the game, in playable form, as close to it as I can get, that shows the current workings of it. Because then I can see, okay, as a user, right, not as a person who's like already knowing what the creative director has said for 6 months and what the team's been bought into for like a year and a half. Like there's none of that in there. It's just, okay, what do I see in front of me? How does it play right now? Can I can I glean from this what the direction is that the team's going for? And I think particularly with Vespa, that was one of the harder points with the direction, much more than other games, because it wasn't a mechanically deep game. It was a game based on its direction. Um, so that's my usual first step is let me just play the thing in that you think is the best representation of the game, or maybe if it has to be multiple slices a bit that. And then usually, um, somewhat unconventionally, I still don't go into design work. I make notes, and then I like to if it is because every one of these reviews is different, right? Like it's a completely different style of game, like we've talked about, or it's a different genre, or the team is different, or the problems are different. Um, Usually, I'll ask the team at that point individually what the game is and how it should play and what they're trying to make, because it gives you a really clear idea if everyone's on the same page about what they're
Mm.
making, and you can see who's responsible for what and what they were either as a team or as an individual or as a sub team that's doing a specific part of it, what their goals were and how they're going about the process. Because it might be that the actual like the direction is great, but the process is bad. So like a lot of the design reviews I do don't actually just cover the design of the thing. It covers the approach to making the thing and the thinking behind, like the show you're working out. And so what I'm usually trying to get to is, okay, is this thing at its core fun to play, or is it doing what I think they might be thinking it's trying to do? And then beyond that, it's are they going about it in the same way, or is that causing friction, or is the direction on track based on what they think they're doing? Like, does their desire for a certain direction, is that actually lining up with what I'm perceiving from the team to be the direction? And so it's trying to find the problems with making the game, not just the game itself.
I think that's so interesting. I like that you go in completely, like, unbiased to any
Yeah,
docs or guides or anything. But yeah, getting the insight from the team is so key because if everybody's got a slightly different interpretation of something, they're not gonna make something cohesive. So that's really, really smart.
yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I remember I've gone into games before where I've worked through a publisher for their games that they're publishing. So I've gone to work for this team, but through the publisher. So I'm sort of talking to both. And the publisher thinks they're making this, and I've gone onto the game, and they're telling me they're making that, or that the expectations are completely off. So we've even gone into situations where we've told teams to go talk to their publisher, and like immediately after landing on the project, within a week or two, we've had the two talk and we've mediated the talk because there's clearly a disconnect. And not something I expected to do, to be totally honest, but it was a clear. You sort of coming in as clear eyes onto the problem, or to the sort of team makeup. You see these things very clearly, whereas you don't often.
Yeah.
I guess that's kind of been my career for a long time anyway, is just being thrown under fires and putting them out. So I'm sort of used to that process now.
You just come in and provide alignment, whether it's on, like, bits of game design, team,
Quite
the
literally, yeah,
bring it all together.
yeah,
So I guess, yeah, you've been in many different studios, different size games. Is
yeah.
there like a common issue or something that you see really often that pretty much everybody falls into that trap of?
Yeah, a lot of times. One of the biggest things that I sort of discuss, I'd say every single project I get into has some sort of problem with, is design production. Like the actual production of something from ideation to prototype to review, which people always skip, or a lot of people skip, to completion. And the reason that like I see problems with that constantly is because that process, studios can quite often get like really dead set on like the process. I mean, you look at a Ubisoft game or something, right? Like this is how we make the game. It's always the same, the same sort of loops. And the problem is that that's not. I don't think I've ever worked in a game where that process has been the same by the end of it, or where we have retrospected it and come back and said, oh, there's these problems. Because every single game has its own problems, whether it be like a resource problem, like you don't actually have the ability to do all of this in parallel to be able to do that by the time they need to be free for that thing. And so you end up with like I've gone into late term, like, or long term projects where this was actually supposed to be done and now the game doesn't quite play right, but maybe it's a live game on Steam, and so they're misaligned because that should have come before that, but they don't have the oversight to say like that system actually doesn't work until this one's in. And so like people are now review bombing the game or whatever, saying that this system's bad, and it's actually like all you needed was this one to be in place beforehand. for them to come in as a package deal, and now this one feels great, but you're missing the information as a player before that happens. So I think understanding the pipeline of making stuff from ideation, and not just like coming up with ideas, but like picking, like how to pick the ideas and how to go about prototyping, and then how to review them, how to greenlight them internally if you're a live game, especially before they go out, so that you don't get review bombed, because that can have horrific effects to you. Is probably the number one thing I've seen in every
Yeah.
game. Yeah,
That's really interesting, understanding that full process and make sure there's time for everything as
yeah.
well. Do you know what else we didn't put? We talked about review, but QA. Everyone forgets to leave time for QA.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
Every I
yeah.
feel like every game I've ever worked on, like, "Oh, yeah, QA, afterthought."
Oh yeah, yeah. I think the places I've worked generally have been pretty good at that, but also still not good enough. Like, it's still there's never the good Q, like there's never the right amount of QA. It feels like it's always, you're always too short.
There's never enough, and then you bring in a QA person, they find so many incredible bugs, and you're like, "Oh god." But also, "Thank you, but oh god."
Yeah, yeah. Or it turns out we had a bug that was actually making it play better, and all our values have been wrong. Like the bug was hiding the bad balancing.
Oh
It
my
had
god.
that. Yeah.
It's wild. So obviously you do all this work for different studios and you do
Hmm.
freelance work and you do contract work for people. And then you're also running your own studio working on Thingamajigs, which I've been following
Yeah.
along with this like the whole time I've known you. It's
Right.
it's such a cute game. It's really lovely and your new art style is beautiful. How do you balance working on your own creative project alongside being a consultant? Because each of them is a full-time job and that's a lot of work. And you have kids and a dog and a family, you know. How do you
Yeah.
balance everything?
Uh, with great difficulty. Uh, this is the honest answer. Um, it's actually, I would say, retrospectively, looking over the 4 years we've been running Tea Imp, it's probably the thing I've struggled the most with. We've actually had a lot of examples where, going from a 100-person studio when we worked at CodeSync to me and my co-founder Scott working on our own thing, like, wow, we now have to wear all these hats, and it's a real shock. I imagine it's a similar shock to when you go from AAA to like a big indie even, but it's just like a different scale. Um, it's we I think a year into team we started doing freelance contracts as well, and sort of put our internal IP stuff on hold, not the which is pre-thingamajig stuff, and then we very quickly found that, like, even though we're two people, actually, um, it's not just about like, oh, you can keep doing that work, and I'll do this work, and then I'll come on and do this work. Um, the actual composition of like how motivation works within even a two-person team is massively important. Like, we actually ended up in ruts throughout the 4 years we've been going, where one of us would be like stuck in the, oh, we're not making enough progress, or we're feeling dissatisfied with the work we're doing because we're never quite on it at the same time or in the same mode at,
Mm,
at the same time. So we might be both on it, but we're doing such wildly different things that you don't see the progress quick enough and you lose heart on the thing you're making. And that's like true for bigger dev teams, but it's actually, I would say, even more important when you're a tiny team, because if people aren't being catered for and they don't see, they aren't hitting those sort of like motivational points of seeing it come together. Certain personality types and certain people, especially people who aren't like, like me, and like love to talk loads, um, they might be like struggling with that motivation over the long term. And I'd say that between me and my co-founder and now, like, again, our talented freelancer friends that we're working with, that's one of the things we're actually really like careful of and attentive of, is that we actually don't take on too much freelancing work on the side. That, like, for someone like me, for instance, I'm pretty good at prototyping stuff, and I'm always the guy who's like, oh, I'm going to make it work, and it's going to be horrible, it's going to look like garbage, but it'll play great, or it'll give us some, if not play great, it will at least tell us why it doesn't. Um, Whereas Scott is like really, really good at the deep, like, program tasks like architecture, data handling, and he doesn't like the prototyping side as much as me. And so when I'm not on, if we're early on in a project, it just sort of slows down, and that's not Scott's fault. That's just because I'm not there on it, and that can be really demotivating. So we know at different points in the project when we can do how much freelancing work and sort of outside work to take on that maintains the balance now. But that's been a 4 year lesson.
essentially, so it's a balance between the work you do, like freelance, and the work Scott does, but then also you'll work together. So you're balancing a lot of different scales to make
Yeah,
sure that
yeah.
works.
And then have 2 kids in those 4 years, and you'll be set and really overworked and tired.
Yeah, yeah, that's exhausting. Um, so we've talked a little bit about, so obviously you go in as freelance at many studios, and
Uh-huh.
many studios will start out with, and whoever the lead is, and then you've got usually like a few coders, a few artists, maybe an
Yeah.
audio person, and quite often design just falls to like almost groupthink or like the bigger vision, and it just
Yeah.
kind of stumbles along. I know from experience, especially from working with you, but with my other designer friends, that it is a specialty. It's a profession in its own right, and it often gets overlooked as like a specific role that is needed on a team until the last
Yeah.
minute when we're like, crap, everything's broken. We need a designer. um, I guess, yeah. I mean, you'll be biased obviously because you are a designer, but
No, no, me, no, no.
from your opinion, like, yeah, when does a team need to bring in a designer? Should you be there right from the start, especially for like indie teams and small startups where
Yeah.
it can be tricky to have headcount for those roles. And often a lot of the roles overlap as well. It can be really tricky bringing someone in with just that focus.
Yeah, I actually don't necessarily think that every team does need a designer if your team, like, there's sort of like a rule, right? Like, if your team works in the way that it works, then it works, is my rule, right? Like, I've seen weird teams, right? Very weird teams, and they make cool things and they make great stuff, and they don't have every role. They just make cool things. Like
Yeah.
this less guys, right? With spaghetti if code and if functions this long, like, they made a really awesome game. It's like one of the best platformers in 10 years or whatever, in my opinion, but the code wasn't great. And it's sort of like, to me, I think when you get to that indie level, especially, you sort of just, it doesn't matter if what you're making is good and you're happy with it. For me, I think that where you start needing a designer, like, and I say need, but when you start, it would be very advantageous, at least to get some time from a designer, is when things aren't clicking or you're not sure how to proceed. Like, I know there have been projects I've worked on prior where they didn't have an in-house designer, um, and it was, I sort of like, I was involved with it for a while, got some design work done, like, because I think like good design work is rooted in really good documentation that like is clear to follow and like explains your thinking, show you're working out. Very, very important. But I remember hearing from them like months later that they were now being asked like what they were going to do next, and they didn't know because they didn't have any design documentation after. And the design documentations from my time being on the project was still just fueling the decision making as to how to go about what to make. And so that was a team composition that actually really was benefiting massively from having a designer on who had like, I wasn't doing the creative vision, that was someone else, but I was putting their creative vision into systems and mechanics and designs that made sense for them. And then they were just happy to be implementing it and then adding, tweaking it here and there. Not, it didn't have to be, prescriptive, but it was just like the general like guiding lines of how the system should function, how it interacts with the other parts of the game. So if that's the problem that a team is facing, I think that's the point where it makes the most sense to get a designer, because you're like, okay, if we've got a system but there's something that isn't quite clicking, or we're not sure, we have this thing but nothing we do is making it fun, or quite literally one of the games I was the lead designer on, Shadowpoint, we had an entire chapter of content made by the time I got on it, and the mechanic, every chapter had a different mechanic. The mechanic for that chapter technically just did not work, and it could not work because it was based on perspective in VR, and it was like you couldn't use the two eyes, so it was like, this is actually just not even feasible to do right now, and so we need an entirely new mechanic and to redesign that whole chapter. Yeah. So I think it was like occlusion, so you could like cover your eyes and then you'd see something different when you undid it. We ended up redesigning it to still be occlusion, but it was like a handheld thing that had different rules so that we could
Oh,
make it work.
okay.
um it was a massive problem because we couldn't
Yeah.
finish the game without it.
That's what I
So
feel like. Yeah,
yeah.
VR is its own beast, right? For like
Oh
so
yeah, of
many
course, yeah.
different design rules and stuff. And I think people are still learning how to make
Wild frontier.
it work.
Yes. Yeah. What, never before has someone had to ask like, but what do we do if they insist on putting their head in a wall? Like, like what do we do if they insist?
It's
Like,
such a, like, games question, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. Does
Other industries
I
probably don't get that, but games, yeah, people are gonna try it.
But I think I genuinely do think being in early days VR makes you a really competent designer because you just have to think about so many stupid little details and rules that where you're like, oh, like usually be like, oh, what if they come off nav mesh or what if they try and do a move and they're hitting to like out of bounds. It's like no, the entire game is out of bounds if you want it to be, like because they just
Stick with
so
it for a while.
yeah, literally we have more. You'll have no more fun than watching QA walking around the room going. You just know what they're doing,
Watching QA do stuff anyway, because the way they manage to break
Yeah,
things is incredible, but yeah, that's
yeah,
even more fun.
yeah,
Amazing. So I would love to talk a little bit about your indie game that your studio's been working on. I know it's called Thingamajigs, and we've seen little bits about it on socials, but can you tell us more about what it is and what you're up to?
yeah. So we'll hopefully have more news to share later in the year, but it's essentially a really wholesome, hand drawn, um, and not necessarily in the same vein as what you traditionally see hidden object game. So the idea is that you have like hidden objects that are in the level. You click on things down here, a la Hidden Forks-esque style thing. But then once you found them, you also have to then like replace them or find where they go. And some of them, it's not necessarily just as dead set as that. Like some of them have multiple stages. But the really cool thing is that every single time you do something, it's advancing a mini narrative that is related to that character that is also acting as a clue. So you get these like funny little stories to follow along with. Like we have one in our first playable demo that's private at the moment, but hopefully later this year we can reveal it. But all of the entire clue is written from the perspective of like a drone sad that they've lost their owner writing to debug, which is pretty funny. Yeah, yeah. It's like where is boy, which is nice that we can do that sort of stuff. But the game's deeply, deeply rooted in like a really warm, wholesome vibe, which is like the one of our key pillars is like the sun is always on. We just want you to have a really pleasant time playing it, and then also putting an ungodly amount of work into making every single thing that you do feel just incredibly satisfying or like really rewarding to do. So I must have spent a week making gum that feels yuck but satisfyingly wet to press on, and then you can sort of pull it off surfaces. But it was a good addition. Like people like it. So, but yeah, we're working on that now. Hopefully later this year we'll be fully announcing it. And yeah, look forward probably to a public demo early next year.
Amazing. That sounds really good. I love that you're putting so much effort into all the little details because as someone who likes to just click on random things and see what they do,
Yeah,
that's going to make that really fun.
we have almost pixel perfect glitches the like surface types. So like I think I spent like an entire afternoon just deciding where like how to do what like perfectly with a VFX, and then our sound guy Dan, who
Yeah.
made a really really nice sound for it. So it just felt
Amazing. Dan's incredible. We love
yeah.
Dan.
He's also doing the music for the game, which he's just audio extraordinaire. He's crazy.
He's so good. He made the music for my podcast as well.
Oh, does he actually?
Yeah, yeah, he's
He's
so
everywhere. He's in
no,
the
he
walls. Hi Dan, I know
yeah,
you're
hi,
watching.
Dan. Amazing. Well, yeah, as and when you've got stuff to share, let me know and I will share it so that
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
people can see. So I guess let's go back to sort of the work you do as a designer. Let's think about the people who might want to work with someone like you who might not have worked with a designer before or they're not quite sure how to approach it. If a studio leader and exec is watching this, they're thinking, do you know what? I need a designer. I need someone to just help me out for a bit, whether it's short term, freelance, fractional role. What is the best way for them to frame their ask so that you know what they want and that you can give them what they need? Because quite often people don't really know what they need either, which is tricky.
Yeah. Um, so I think that the biggest thing is that if a place has already got some of the understanding about what the problem they're facing, any information about what they think the problem is, even if I disagree with it, ultimately that is the problem, in the end, knowing what people think the problem is a massive, massive boon. It's a real indicator of the team's mentality towards something. Um, Equally, on top of that, just being open to the idea that I'm going to go in unbiased and play the game and just give me access to stuff and like give me access to team members as well, like key important figures who are decision making on it, so that I can ask them openly about how things are going and what they're trying to do. I would say is a good thing to do if direction or anything about like the team cohesion is part of the issue. Um, I think on top of that, I mean, as you know, being open to the feedback I give, like usually what I do when I do these sort of, I call them design analysis docs, is part of part of the sort of the interaction between us is that at the very end, after I've delivered it, you get some time, right, as you know, to go away and think about it, but then also an entire day of my time to just pester me as much as you want, to ask about it, talk through it, workshop it, discuss the possible solutions, you know, beyond what I've already written. And I think just being open to the feedback and being open to like, it's not, what I'm going to give you is not going to be the solve. It's the start of the solve, right? It's the, we're probably gonna look at some of these things. It's suggestions for how you might approach it, but ultimately the solve is only going to come from changing mindsets. If it's a deeply systemic problem, or if it's something about like how we're trying to approach the design of something, which is often the case. Um, I think in terms of like just practical things as well, is if there is a turnaround time, be upfront about that. If you need something, or you only want a certain amount of engagement from me, or you want a certain, like if you see the working relationship being in it, you know, actually we just want you on once a month to come play something and give us feedback, like that can be valuable, but that's like a smidgen of what I would do otherwise for the overall design analysis. So it's important to know that upfront. And I think beyond that, it's just, yeah, just being open about the game. I think, I mean, when people are not open about the game, it's also equally as telling. To be honest, you know, when I'm trying to do the rounds and I'm trying to get information about how the game's being made. But I think being open and sort of open to discussion on the game is probably ultimately how you get value out of whatever I give you, right? Because if you're closed off and you think it's perfect and you don't want to change it, I can do my job fine, but you're not going to get anything out of what I give you, right? Like, not everything I say is guaranteed to be perfect. Some of it might even be wrong ultimately, because I've only got a certain amount of time on the game, right, to review or to give thoughts on it. Um, but I think if you're someone, or you know that your team is going to, you know, essentially bounce it off, you know, it's going to reflect of your barrier that you don't actually want it, then there's not really much point. So you have to come with an open mind of like, okay, and similar to how I would with the game, coming unbiased, come to the report knowing that I have no biases to it. You know, I obviously I want every game to succeed, but I'm not coming in to say, oh, this is great, or oh, this is terrible, purely off the sake of an emotional response. It's just like, I'm going to come and see what I think is the problem.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that having an open mind is key, right? Because if you're
mhm.
coming there to help, if people aren't willing to listen to the feedback and the suggestions, there's only so much you can do. So yeah, that's probably
Yeah,
the important
yeah.
thing.
We've had, and I've had experiences with that. We've had, you know, if I not to my own harm, but we've had experiences where, you know, years later, someone's come back and be like, "Oh, you were right. Actually, we should have probably done that change, or we should probably have had a look at that." But at the time, it was very much like just abrasion, not you know, unfriendly, but it was just a resistance to change because it wasn't deemed important. But actually, when you know the game ultimately came out, the systems weren't working in the same ways that they hadn't been working a year and a half prior, because they never addressed it.
Yeah, it's tricky because I think people get so attached to their own thing and what they're working on, don't they? And it's like there's that phrase where it's like "kill your darlings," but not many people are willing to do that. Most people like they just want to protect it and keep it going. And a lot of the sunk cost fallacy of we've been working on this, we'll keep going for a year, and it just yeah, it's wasted time and effort.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you chop stuff off the game, do whatever you need to do to make it work, and then if you're missing things, rebuild them, but with the new path.
Yeah, and that chopping stuff out of the game is key, right? Because often stuff's so complicated and it's lost its heart and soul. And if you just get
Yeah,
back to like a core simple mechanic and then build upon that, you're gonna have a better time rather than trying to fix this massive
absolutely. Like
convoluted thing.
direction, maintaining the direction is key for sure.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Lee. It's been so cool to have a chat. It's nice to just have a chat
Yeah, no,
with
yeah, it's been
gamers.
lovely. Yeah,
I'm gonna have to stop by sometime and come say hello in person.
yeah,
But
yeah,
before we go, I would love to know what is next for you. I know we were talking about this earlier and saying like
yeah.
games industry is such a mess. I mean, it's like, what is next? Who knows? We're making it up as we go along. But any ideas what you're going to be doing next?
Uh, I I legitimately don't know. I mean, only this week have I found myself at a crossroads of 4 to 5 different paths. So there's plenty. We're definitely going to continue making thingamajigs, as in whatever capacity we can. Um, Maybe potentially freelancing work, and then potentially other work on the side of that. Even it all depends. The where we are very much in the flux of we'd be pitching the game to a lot of people, but we're also continuing to make the game and then also look into other stuff that we could go do as freelancing opportunities. So who knows? Who knows? I'm also doing a lot of mentoring through Limit Break at the moment as well. So that's also keeping me tuned in. I've got like every single one of them has got a very wildly very different problem or a different thing they want
Mm,
mentorship with. So that's fun. So probably more of that as well.
yeah, super rewarding stuff. And I like
Hmm.
the honesty of, trying lots of different things and doing many things all at once, because I think quite often the advice is like, oh, you do this one thing, focus on that. But you and I were saying, like, we're both doing the same thing where you're hedging your bets a little bit, trying lots of different things
Yeah,
because you need to keep the lights on, you need to keep the studio alive. And yeah, I feel like none of us want to put all our eggs in that one basket at the moment. We want to keep the options open just because of how the industry is. It's a bit of a mess.
yeah. I think industry past like you could probably safely do that because having a career of 30 years at the same place was possible, whereas now that's not really feeling like it is. And yeah, I think you've just got to look out for yourself, right? Like look out for the people you work with and just see what can you do, where are you looking for funding, where are you looking for work, how is that going to sustain the dev. Doing it like there's plans we have where depending on A, B, or C happening, D will happen. But maybe if C doesn't work, maybe B and D will happen, and we do F. And like everything comes with a lag time, right? Like getting approval for things or getting things signed has like 1 month here, 2 months there. So we're always in flux, and our plan is constantly changing at the moment.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
which I feel
Very
is the
honest
answer
answer.
everyone is doing. Yeah, yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
We're all doing the same thing. Amazing. Well, thank you, Lee. Could you just let everybody know if they want to follow along with you, Tea Imp Games, where can they find more info about you? What socials are you on?
Yeah, so we have a website, tmpgames.com. If you want to just look at the site and then we have a contact email on there, or you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably where I post the most like just professional stuff, and we've been sharing some of the stuff on Thingamajigs. Or if you just want to see stuff on Thingamajigs or weird little takes that I'll post every now and then, you can find me on Blue Sky as at Designer Goblin because that's probably the best way to identify me.
Amazing. I will put all those links in the show notes for people. Thank you so much, Lee. It's been lovely having a catch up.
Yeah, no, it's been great. Thanks.